All right, welcome back to the Dharma Dank Podcast, episode 3. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking about manifestation and magic and what that means and what it doesn't mean. Because a lot of times, everyone's trying to manifest what they want, but oftentimes what you want is not what you needed. And you know this universally in a way, because that's the nature of every story, every Pixar film, every well-made film. It goes through the same narrative arc. Someone usually thinks they know what they want, and they go after what they want, and they discover that that's not what they need. What they needed is connection, and then usually in the third act, you fight for that connection, and you realize the truth of everything, and then you go home. And going home is sometimes a metaphor for death and dying. But usually what you want is in the desire to feel connected, whether it is money or, the perfect job or this and that. It's usually something to feel loved or to feel you deserve love, because unfortunately a lot of people raise their kids, that they have to do the right thing in order to be loved. But that is the illusion. And what you really need is connection. And finding connection is easier than you think. It's when you stop thinking towards yourself alone, but outside of you, and live towards a goal outside of yourself. And that's when connection begins to happen. I was in Corona Flushing Meadows Park today, where they have the Unisphere, the famous Unisphere that was also in Men in Black with the flying saucers and stuff like that. And it was the site of the 1964 World's Fair, a time of all optimism and grand visions of space explorations before we landed on the moon. And the idea to do it was there, and the whole world was looking through the stars. Star Trek was about to happen. And I don't know if you realize this, but the reason people like Star Trek as opposed to other universes is that in Star Trek they've gotten rid of capitalism. There is no more capitalism in Star Trek. That's why they explore, because they're passionate. They're not doing it out of need and necessity or scarcity or desperation, like in Star Wars, where there's credits and people are fighting and killing each other for that. Whereas in Star Trek, you travel to the stars because you want to, because it's a passion you have, because they've gotten rid of capitalism. A lot of people don't realize that. It takes them a while to think about it, but that's what makes Star Trek so different and so logical, as opposed to the other universes where people kind of keep cool heads as they're trying to prevail, and they explore for passion. And, at Corona Park, I used to always drive by there, see the globe in the distance, the Unisphere, the statue of a metallic globe. In the center of the Fountain of Planets, they call it. And they used to play music along with the fountains and synchronize it with fountain jets that are colored with colored lights, and people would look on in awe. And that park is actually dilapidated and very few visitors, as opposed to the other major parks in New York City. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's sort of the death of these dreams of an optimistic future. It's a retro-futuristic thing, but because it's so decrepit and worn out, it feels like a faded dream that never came to pass, where we never had flying cars and such like that. But I wanted to be there and visit that and kind of tap into the dream space that people were looking towards, the reality they were looking to manifest back in that time during the World's Fair in 1964, before, I guess, the recession that would come in the 70s and kind of derail all that optimism and swing back liberalism towards conservatism, because Jimmy Carter was blamed for the entire recession. And then we had Reagan and neoconservatives and neoliberals that are just people looking for the interests of corporate interests, because we've given human rights to corporations, believe it or not. In our current law system, that's how it functions, and that's kind of nuts. But if you think about it, corporations are sort of Godheads. They sort of have their own souls, and they do have huge sway over massive amounts of the population, where they almost worship Microsoft and Apple, and people give their entire livelihoods towards these corporations and thinking that they are in good hands whenever they're taken in by the corporation, and even proudly being laid off by these corporations, knowing that that is how they work, that's how they function. But it's a little wild how corporations have taken on this godlike nature, in my opinion. Anyway, we talk about manifestation, right? It's been gloomy times these days. We have a crazy president, and and the sirens are going off just the right moment as I speak about him. And of course, in the future, we'll look back and wonder, how on earth did we have such a crazy leader? How on earth did we vote for him? And what were we thinking? And this is like another cycle, though, of course, because this happened during Reagan, where when Reagan was first president, people were like, actor as president? That's crazy. Trump is like the second version of this, except the reality star that became president. And I think a lot of people, they vote against their own interests. A lot of poor people vote against their own interests because they wish to be rich. They think, well, if I become rich, I don't want them to take away my this and that. And so poor people keep voting against their own interests, and it keeps whittling away at their social safety net and such. But it's a pipe dream fantasy that is not really meant for you. It's meant as a bait and trap to confuse people with less means, to keep giving power to the rich because you hope to be rich. But again, manifestation is not about getting what you need. It's about manifestation is not about getting what you want. It's about getting what you need. And for instance, even in like senior year of high school, I was, at Bed Bath & Beyond getting stuff for college. I was going to go to new school. And I remember telling my mother, the one thing I wished is that I didn't have a smelly roommate. And then I ended up getting the guy in the whole school that was nicknamed Smelly. And he became sort of my Mara, sort of demon head for me to study and learn through. Because he smelled so bad, I got into incense, and I would have friends visit and be like, tell him to take a fucking shower, He was very tall, elfin-looking man, and he was really smart. He had a lot of philosophy books. He had a jazz collection that was the envy of the jazz school students. Would come by and look at his collection and admire it. And we would have deep probing conversations here and there. And at some point early on, I realized that his decision not to shower was partially because he lived in the mountains for like weeks on end. And that's how he lived. It was a choice. It was a choice that he made philosophically, and in a sense it was a cultural decision he made. And I realized I had to tolerate it. I had to be extremely tolerant of it. I could have seen myself getting super upset by it, but then I realized, like, no, I have to allow it, because it's like all kinds of different cultures and how they can be different. And I don't know, the smell's not gonna kill me. I mean, I got kind of used to it. I remember 3/4 of the way into the school year, he would look at his pile of clothing on his bed, and he turned to me and he asked me, like, how do you do laundry? And I was a little bit taken aback, but I taught him how to do laundry for the first time 3/4 into the year. And I was not just being a pushover. I wasn't just, it was a conscious decision to be tolerant. And that was a great year in my life. I learned a lot. Also, I studied like race theory and women's studies and all sorts of things like that. I also studied art history, macroeconomics, biology. I just didn't want to be ignorant about anything anymore, so I decided to just take a bunch of courses that made no sense for no major in particular. And my, the advisors didn't understand what I was doing, but I just wanted to do things I was interested in, and I'll get good grades and stuff. I studied existentialism, different things. But through existentialism, I learned that I create my reality before I became spiritual. And I'm privileged in terms of spirituality because it sort of came at me. It happened to me multiple times. I was not even a seeker. I was a resistance seeker. So I feel a little bit bad about people that seek and want to be spiritual, but I don't know, maybe that's partially why I became so spiritual, is because I was never a seeker. Anyway, as I studied existentialism, I decided, like, if I was truly a feminist, I should have women friends that I don't want to secretly sleep with, just like male friends. So I would cultivate genuine friendships and make it a rule never to cross a line, not even look at a person funny, even if I was attracted to them. And this always turned out okay in the end, because attraction only at its peak happens in the beginning, right? And then it fades away as you get to know the person. And most of the time I get to know the person, I'm like, oh, it's a good thing I never did anything, And there's even been times where I was attracted to someone, but then I decided, no, we're friends, I'm never gonna cross the line. And then she makes the move, and then I just act like it's not happening because I already determined we are friends and I'm not letting that happen. Part of this is because I remember hearing a story of a young woman. She was Korean, and she was dating this guy who she liked a lot, and she thought he was really great. And then she figured out that he had an Asian fetish, and it really messed her up. But what also, I don't know, that also made me realize, like, oh man, like doing the switcheroo with a friendship just because they're the opposite gender, it sucks. I've also had like a few times like gay male friends who would be close and friends, and then one night they're drunk or something, and then they like make a move or something, and I'm just like, oh damn, you just will never quite be the same again. And I don't want to put anyone else in that kind of position, just knowing how awful it feels and how it feels sort of like a betrayal of the friendship. That's why I made a very hard and fast rule. Anyway, I'm going off on wild tangents. I've noticed signs in threes. You'll notice signs in threes often when you're getting like messages, predictions, things like that. And it always happens in threes, especially when I lose touch with the magic here and there, when like the reality of everyday life in New York starts to become very grueling and monotonous and banal, and I forget the magic, and then it happens again. It's usually at that point I've noticed. Maybe you notice when things are not going as planned, when you feel kind of stuck, a little sign emerges, wakes you up into the truth of this illusion of reality, or the matrix, they say. But this happens often, and recently I got a sign in threes where I found a buffalo nickel, which seemed very magical, and then I bumped into a Tibetan monk that was lost, and I helped him find his way. And then I met this doula I interviewed years ago for a podcast. These feel like signs, and opportunities arise. I had 2 opportunities occur recently. One was the opportunity to direct or edit a music video, and then the opportunity to write a drama show about pizza places. I'm not really supposed to talk about it, and so maybe a third is coming. It always happens in threes, so I'm waiting for that third one. But I have no expectations, but infinite hope. That's the best way to deal with things. Have no expectations, but infinite hope, which is not as easy as it sounds. I find people kind of get resentful after a while when they have expectations and nothing's coming of it, or hope. But that's because the hope is intermingled with the expectation. I think when you let go of expectations, you get extraordinary results and responses and reactions and things like that. Even 2 Halloweens ago, this is a little silly, but 2 Halloweens ago, I had a message sent to my mind that said the Mets would win the World Series, and this was super absurd. So I told all the people at the party and that I was getting this message that the Mets would win the World Series. And this young woman, she was really excited because she said, oh, I love the Mets. I was like, I don't know what's going on. But when I get these deep messages, sometimes they happen. And because this happened with COVID as well, I sort of knew COVID was coming, and I talked about it on another podcast, some world-changing event that would change everything all of a sudden. But I could not place my finger on exactly what it was, and I was hoping it wasn't war, but it was COVID, right? But I was certain of it, and I talked about it many times. But so anyway, the Mets, I thought they would win the World Series, and then halfway through the season, I see they're doing terribly, and I'm like, maybe I was wrong, maybe I'm not, I'm losing my touch. And then as the season was coming to a close, I saw a bunch of people wearing Mets gear coming into a cafe, and they all looked excited, and I was like, oh, what's going on? They're like, Mets are in the playoffs. I was like, what? And I told them out loud, I was like, it's crazy, because last year I was given a vision telling me the Mets would win the World Series, and they freaked out. Everyone freaked out, because what I didn't know was that's bad luck to say your team's going to go to the World Series. So I felt really bad, because I was like, oh fuck, I fucked it up, And after I said it, they started losing again and again, And a friend of mine at the place who is very atheist, he actually asked me if I would pray for the Mets to win. And I was like, I don't use my reality shifting prayers for that, such a thing like that. But he said it would bring a lot of joy. So I was like, all right, fine. So I went to the park that day, and I did a reality shifting meditation prayer, asking for the Mets to win, and not expecting anything, just with hope for joy, right? And as I was out with my buddy Dwayne, we were out on the streets, he nudged me and pointed into a bar, and we saw that the Mets were winning and by a large margin. And I was like, holy shit. And they won that day. I mean, they didn't win initially, you know, the playoffs, but they won that game, so it wasn't a total shutout. And it did bring a lot of joy to the Mets fans. So they didn't exactly win. However, right, because manifestation and things, they're very meandery. I find that these messages don't occur directly, but around that same time is when I had my first major viral video. So, and I've been working on making, you know, content since September of last year. And then I just went viral for the first time after that prayer. So I think honestly, the vision, the message was really, I was going to hit it big, or something big was going to happen to me. And I know that's not the most extraordinary thing, but the first time is pretty wild, you know, and the first time was fun that I went viral. And it was actually a warning about fame. That's what the video was about. Warnings about the dangers of fame and how if you become famous at all, you end up creating a god by accident. And the key to not being destroyed is knowing that you're not the god. So when people hate you, it's not you they hate, it's the god you're projecting as a celebrity. When they love you, also, it's not you they love, it's the god you're projecting. That's more important, to know that it's not you they love either. Because once you start thinking you are the god you project and try to consume the love and the hate people are throwing at you, at the godhead that you're projecting, you are in grave danger. And, you know, people end up dying by accident for that reason. So keeping that separation is very integral to keeping yourself safe in those situations. But I find karma, manifestation, the laws of attraction, they occur more indirectly, more mysteriously, but they have but it's the timing that tells you what's going on. Because the timing is the wink. The timing is sort of the key to figuring out how these events connect. Like, for instance, I had a friend of mine, her mother is sort of dying of Alzheimer's, and she was going to go visit her, and I bottled a gallon of organic green juice I made from scratch, and I brought it to her at Grand Central to give to her mom. And then when I had to leave and go to this workshop, but I mistimed it where I couldn't meditate where I usually do. And I went outside, I wanted to go to a park, but it was raining. And then I saw these people gathering in front of a center, and I was like, what is that? And it was this like religious center, like a all religious center started by some guru. And I go inside and I say, hey, what's going on? They're like, oh, they're doing a free meditation thing upstairs. Oh, I was like, that's amazing, you know. They're like, yeah, join, you know. And I went upstairs and they were doing this meditation, and it was really beautiful. And I told the person when I was done that a series of synchronicities led me to this. And I was very grateful. The guy was very like, cool, you know. And then I went home the next day and I was telling my brother-in-law about what happened. And that's when I got a message that I had $5,000 thrown into my bank account, and I was given a free trip to LA for this event with all these celebrity Asians. Suddenly, like out of nowhere. It was after the juice. So it kind of like felt like, okay, I know what's going on. And then the thing in threes that happened where I was at a festival and I saw a poisonous spider inside our tent, and I carefully caught it without hurting it and released it instead of killing it, because I could have killed it, but you know, I just took extra effort not to. And then the next day I was on a dock and I was talking to this woman, and she had a poisonous spider in her hair, and I was like, hey, don't move, stay calm. I'm just gonna just stay still. I'm gonna grab something out of your hair. And I grabbed it, put it on my sleeve. It didn't bite me, but it looked scared. As we were talking about it, someone was like, oh yeah, that's poison. I was like, oh great. And then I carefully, walked the spider off the dock and put it into the ground, and that was great. And then the next day, a woman was bit by a poisonous spider, and she was very freaked out. And upon hearing this, I found the doctor on site, got a prescription for antibiotics, and drove like 4-hour round trip to get the antibiotics to the woman. And it ended up reversing her reaction and maybe saving her life, because she was getting sick, feverish, and it was swollen to hell. It was disgusting. But I think saving that first spider led me to helping 2 other people from getting horribly damaged by other spiders. So I don't know. I'm a storyteller too, so it's just very story-like. But this really happened, right? And writing and storytelling is another reason why it's another way I tapped into unity, because storytelling and writing and incantation, that is a type of spellcasting. And a lot of times the stories I've written, like fake sci-fi worlds that I've created, they start to happen and emerge in real life. And the world I've always wanted to live in is kind of been happening. Because I was, honestly, I was woke in the 90s, and I did not expect to see this level of progress that we have. Even in spite of, all the pushback of the woke movement and such, I didn't think we would get this far, though, where it was mainstream to say they, them, and for it to be okay to be queer and all this stuff, and for people to call out white supremacy. I didn't expect to see that in my lifetime. And in a lot of ways, I feel I manifested this new world. And I recognized, the angst and stuff that I used to have in high school that a lot of these kids are having now, and how it's unchecked aggression, but it'll peter out once everyone relaxes, and we'll come up with solutions instead of just complaining. Because it's always best to inspire people to change rather than yelling at them and complaining. That's okay. It gets the issue out there, but it doesn't convince anyone of anything, I have found. And I've been able to go to the nest of my enemies, right? And make them see things differently, inspire them to see things in a way that is more harmonious with all, and in very trickster methodologies. Like, for instance, if I meet a bunch of conservatives, I will first connect on 100 different things before talking about any issues or anything like that. I'll connect on, we agree that homemade compost is better than store-bought. We agree that visiting grandma on Tuesday is a great thing to do. And then after I connect on 100 different things, I'm so humanized by that point that then I can talk about issues, but tangentially through storytelling, not through facts and figures, but through my own stories of lived experience, which is less easy to deny. And once I'm humanized, they listen and they start to actually think back on how they think, and I'm able to change minds that way. It's not that easy, but I'm able to do it, and I will do it while I can with whatever privileges I have. But anyway, I encourage everyone to write stories, write fiction, because when you get into a real flow in storytelling and writing, you're not even creating anymore. You're sort of channeling another world. I believe that. Even my first major project was called the Cubby. It was like the first major project I tried to produce. And the Cubby is about the multiverse, right? But this was 15, 20 years ago. And in this story, there's a woman, Dorothy, from another universe, and she's traveled here from another Earth, and she has a little device called the Cubby, which is a cube. And each side of the cube you attach to a door, and it will create a doorway into this other world. But the way that this works is that the multiverse is conceptual in nature. So you have to imagine a different universe, and then it exists. And then you can go there, and it's always existed. And these humans, they travel through it. They lock in each side of a cubby. Once you lock it into another universe, it's locked, right? So you can only have 6 universes per cubby forever, right? But as they travel through the multiverse, it grows, and it's known as the concept to these other humans, right? And Dorothy, she comes to our Earth and shows a bartender named Danielle how this works and what this is. All the while you're wondering, why is this even happening, while there's these 2 other men trying to catch them for some reason. And then you discover that Danielle was Dorothy's girlfriend that was killed in a bike accident 2 weeks ago. And she stole a cubby from the government to travel here and see Danielle again, who is her girlfriend and is not her girlfriend. And she has to realize there's a fine line between love and obsession. And love is about freedom. And obsession is about control. Love is about the freedom to have you and not have you. And obsession is when you have to have them. And she needs to come to terms with the fact that she loved her and is not as obsessed with her. And that sort of helps resolve the plot. But in this world, psychics are humans that can see through dark energy and dark matter, which is the substance that separates the multiverse. So on that other Earth, they train psychics to be travelers and explorers. And that's why psychics aren't 100% correct, because when they see the future or the past, they're looking at a future or a past on another Earth, not necessarily their own. But, then Everything Everywhere All at Once came out, and, friends of mine were like, oh, look, this is kind of similar. I was like, oh, yeah, it is kind of similar. And it's also the plot contrivance of Into the Spider-Verse as well. Because like, when I watched that in theaters and I saw like how the plot worked, I was like, oh god damn it, that's the Cubby story. But my partner was like, no one's gonna know. I'm like, yeah, but it's the same plot mechanism. They're gonna think I stole this from Spider-Verse. But yeah, that happens. I'll write things, they emerge in media or as science fiction concepts, like another play I wrote called Plastic. Anyway, point is, I wrote this stuff as a fiction writer. I'll pitch Plastic another time. And then it emerges. And you'll notice that more and more when you write. Because Alan Moore, the mystic and writer of Watchmen and V for Vendetta, he doesn't believe there is such a thing as fiction, because he believes regardless, over time, eventually, anything you write does manifest and happen in reality. So it's a form of incantation, chaos magic. And I encourage you to write your own stories, write your own sigils, and feel through the stories, and you'll start to channel these other worlds. But do that for your own world. Feel through where you want to be at, and it will start to emerge in this reality. It's a form of alchemy, and that's what writing can do. I might do more like magic and spellcasting and sort of things like that, Neville Goddard sort of stuff, I think probably in the next episode. But for now, I think I will end this third podcast. I'm sorry for like the kind of meandery, ranty thing I did, but I think it was fun. And please, in YouTube, give me comments, ask for things that you want me to talk about. Also on TikTok as well, because I kind of show clips of the podcast on TikTok. And let me know about any topics or things you want me to discuss about creativity, interpersonal relationships, spirituality, magic, writing. Because I can answer a lot of stuff, and I want to. And I want to keep it going too, just have more things to talk about. Because I can go on and on, of course, but I like to have a little direction and collaborate with audiences to do that. Because I'm more of a collaborative artist than anything else. I love collaborative art and creating something that no one could have imagined on their own, and watching that collaborative energy create miracles in a sense. So we're gonna close now with a guided meditation, and it will be healing meditation. Okay, this is to help heal someone that you feel needs healing. Okay, and I advise you too that when you do a healing meditation for someone, don't let them know you're doing it. Don't let them know. Just believe in it and don't let them know. And I'll tell you the secret of how it works. And it's based on my own life and how I've figured this out. All right, so just sit back, have your back straight and relax. And I'm gonna have a hand up in the air like an antenna, gathering energy, one hand down below, funneling this energy, the energy of Tonglen, the energy of unification. And let's just close our eyes and breathe in and out. Just breathe in and out through the nose. Just breathe at your own natural pace. In and out. Now begin to breathe in the evil of the world and exhale love. Breathe in the darkness. Exhale light. Breathe in the pain. Exhale healing. In with darkness. Out with light. Keep breathing in and out. The horrors. Exhaling love. As you breathe in darkness, exhale with the mind mantra where you say all is love. In with darkness. Exhale, love is all. Repeat, all is love, love is all. and repeating mantra as you take in the darkness and exhale light and love. You are becoming an engine of change, an engine unifying these energies, an engine of transmutation. This is the alchemical breath work. As you breathe in the horrors and exhale that all is love. Breathe in adversity. Love is all. In and out. Now, as you continue breathing, visualize the person you're trying to heal. And now breathe in their suffering. And exhale love and light back into their bodies. Breathe in their pain. Exhale healing. Now, as you continue to breathe, remember the prayer you're asking. And in this prayer, you will tell the universe that you will accept the worst of outcomes. You will accept the horrors of not healing. You'll accept the worst case scenario as you breathe in and out. But if the worst must happen, we are begging the universe that it can at least lead to a series of events that can lead to a perfect moment. It can be the day after, it can be 100 years from now. But if the worst must happen, please beg the universe for it to lead to perfection in the end. In and out. Beg the universe that you'll accept the worst. Tell the universe you are of acceptance. But if the worst must come, please let it lead to perfection. With the next in-breath, lift up this energy you're cultivating and push it out to the person that requires healing. Lift this energy again with the in-breath and push it again to the person that needs compassion and an end to suffering. Lift it one more time and push it out to that person. Breathe in the horrors of the world. Exhale love. Breathe in the darkness. Exhale love. In, out, in, and out. I'll do 3 final breaths where we speak the mantra aloud as we breathe in the darkness. Exhale. All is low. In with the pain. Low is all. In with the horrors of the world. All is low. Thank you. So, I've done this prayer quite a few times for quite a few people in harrowing situations, and when you mean it fully, that you will accept the worst fully, begging that can lead to something perfect. This is how the prayer works in its most powerful form, and I've seen miraculous recoveries where as if the person was never in any trouble to begin with, and no one understands how that happened. And I don't let the people know that I'm doing it because I'm not trying to get placebo effect out of there and make it my own thing, where I want it to be real, and I don't want anyone to pay me for it or benefit from it in any way, because it's not what it's about. But I find that that's how it works. You accept the worst and you have to mean it and pray for at least something beautiful to happen afterwards, if the worst must come, but usually it just works. So if you know anyone that is in pain, suffering like this, do the prayer and see what happens. And then if they recover, then you can let them know that you did a prayer, that you learned it and stuff. But this was the prayer that helped me survive miraculously from near-death experiences several times. And it was through accepting the worst, not avoiding it. So anyway, hope it works for you. Thank you for coming to this another episode of the podcast, and I'll see you next week for the Dharma Dank Podcast. Take care, y'all.